This is Talk of the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up on this specially focused show to mark Ruben Amorim's 12 months in charge of the club. We're going to take a look back at how he became the Manchester United head coach, take a look at exactly how he works and what we know about some of the relationships he has within the club and how they compare to his public persona, and also ask the question about what the next 12 months might have in store for Amorim and his side. Well, here we are in London town, in the office, in the studio. Everyone back together again after our exploits the last couple of days in Manchester and London. We feeling all right?
I'm feeling fantastic. I've actually not got sick to the sight of you yet. So maybe this will sick to the sight of you.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Sick to the death of you?
Sick of the sight of you.
Sick of the sight of you. There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I've said a lot of words over the last 2 days.
Yeah, good,
I've
good.
forgotten what some of them mean.
Yeah, it's been great though, hasn't it? It's been fantastic to see so many people, and we've had a ball, haven't we, to be fair?
Yeah, it's gone well. Manchester, the new Century Hall, which is a great venue, as was the Soho Theatre in Walthamstow. It's good that these places are kept alive because they both closed for a time, and they were both historic venues, and in the 60s, you know, the best musicians in the world played. Hendrix played in Manchester.
Yeah.
New Century Hall, the Beatles, who were from Liverpool, someone told me. Not sure that's true. They played in at the Soho Theatre. But it's good to meet people face to face who listen to this podcast, and hopefully people enjoyed it and learned stuff they didn't know.
Yeah, thank you again to everyone who came down, and let's do it again sometime. Right, let's get into this then. So Ruben Amorim, we're 12 months since he became the Manchester United head coach. There's many different ways we can take this anniversary, but we're going to encompass them all across the course of this podcast. So let's look back at how he became the United manager to start with, Andy. Your piece looked at how Manchester United got to the decision of keeping Erik Ten Hag in charge and then switching a few months later. So just give us a bit of background as to how it all came about.
So in May 24, following a defeat against Crystal Palace, the feeling against Erik Ten Hag hardened to the fact that he was not the right man to lead Manchester United forward. United did win the FA Cup comprehensively against City with a good match plan. There was a surge in support for Erik Ten Hag, but Manchester United still had a short list of 6 coaches and spoke or communicated with all of them, met some of them in person, and 2 names came out of that, which was Thomas Tuchel and De Zerbi. And discussions were had with both about becoming Manchester United manager. Tuchel said now was not the time for him. He'd had a tough time at Bayern Munich. And De Zerbi asked for a lot of money. And Manchester United were not prepared to increase the original financial package which had been discussed. I would be stunned if De Zerbi is on a third of what he asked for United for in his current job at Olympique de Marseille. So then, with time ticking, Erik Ten Hag stayed as Manchester United manager. By the October, after a poor start to the season, after Ten Hag had agreed to move on his own technical staff, people like Benny McCarthy moved on, the decision was made to fire Erik Ten Hag. It was communicated to him by Omar Barada. Erik Ten Hag was shocked. I spoke to Ten Hag a few weeks after. The word I used was bruised, which is understandable. Football can be a very tough industry. And Ruben Amorim had come sharply into focus. He was a name who, when Manchester United's decision makers were sounding out who's going to be the next big coach, 2 names were coming forward who weren't on the list. Thiago Motta, who'd done very well at Bologna, was about to join Juventus, and Ruben Amorim. And there were talks with Amorim. Jason Wilcox was the opinion that he was fantastic, and a meeting was set up with Amorim in Seville. This was after a couple of meetings, Barcelona, London, Barcelona, where Ineos people were based around the America's Cup. And then there was a 5-hour meeting in Seville where Ruben Amorim outlined his full football philosophy. Jim Ratcliffe flew in with Dave Brailsford as well later on in that day. The meeting went really well. A couple of times, Ruben Amorim said, "Why now?" 3 times he asked that. Why now? Why now? And Manchester United felt they wanted him. And there were going to be mistakes, get them out of the way early, get them out of the way last season. There were lots of mistakes last season. He was offered the job. There was another meeting in Lisbon, which Omar Brada attended with senior people from Sporting. And then it led to him accepting the job. There was some hesitation. United needed to apply some pressure.
Like that kind of deadline, right?
Yeah. And he came back and said, yeah, thanks for putting your trust into me. I accept it. And it was like, you're going to be the new Manchester United coach.
It's interesting to look back at it now, Laurie, because we scrambled together to record a podcast just about when Erik Ten Hag was sacked. And we'd not really finished even recording that when we first got wind, or you first got wind, that it could be Ruben Amorim that was going to be the choice, or it would be Ruben Amorim that was going to be the choice for United. And then we had to quickly then redo the podcast.
I remember it, yeah. A little add-on at the end.
Yeah, it was like clear very quickly that United had decided who they were going for.
It was that day, I think, that Barada flew to Lisbon after they'd sacked Erik Ten Hag, so it was quick. They obviously had done all the preparation, as Andy has fantastically detailed in that piece, and just spoken about the ways in which they got to that point. So I think the Fenerbahce game was a key one, where there was executives that weren't at the Fenerbahce game that was kind of telling. And obviously United drew that one, and it was another draw in Europe where they were sort of worried about progress in that competition, which obviously would be a route to the Champions League if they won it. Obviously the West Ham game was the kind of final point at which they decided we're going to pull the trigger here, but clearly the work had been done. So that was was it a Sunday, the West Ham game? And so then the Monday was him being dismissed, and then straight away Amorim was, we got the calls that, I think there was, Adam Crafton and David Ornstein also were hearing similar things, and clearly United had got to that point, and then it was a case of basically negotiating with Sporting over the release clause, which, was a set price, but they wanted him to start straight away, whereas there was some room for negotiation, and he ended up staying a couple more matches, obviously.
Went well though, didn't it?
Well, exactly. It was kind of perfect. It could have gone either way, I remember speaking to people around it at the time thinking, if he then goes and gets hammered by City, it doesn't look as clever a move, but I suppose you just at that point are thinking we want this guy, so whatever happens, it's kind of irrelevant. We've done enough, we feel, background work, because they spoke to him when they first looked at replacing Ten Hag around the FA Cup final, except at that point I'm told there was a little bit of a reservation, or at least a question mark, over the back three system and how that would be a real change from what they've got currently, the squad, etc., as well, being equipped for it. And also Amorim, yes, he had won 2 league titles by this point, but there was maybe still a little bit of uncertainty. Could he then translate it into the Premier League? And they effectively had to wait until the start of the next season then, which showed that they started like a house on fire, didn't they? 10 wins in a row, Champions League victory. So I think they were kind of convinced at that point, this could work.
Yeah, Carl, Andy mentioned it before, Amorim saying repeatedly, why now? Why mid-season? Why not at the end of the campaign? He obviously stayed in the end to beat Manchester City and then beat Braga as well, who were the big rivals in Portugal at the time for Sporting. But how do you reflect on what he's been able to do in these 12 months in terms of using the time that he had in the Premier League last season, he's overtly said, to prepare for this year?
It's been tough. I think I said before the season started that there were 2 big scenarios this campaign was going to go. Either Ruben was going to take all of the learnings he made from those many, many negative results and use that knowledge to take this season on properly. So I think Bruno Fernandes and Ruben have both said now that Amorim's first couple of months, he perhaps didn't quite have a proper gauge of the bottom half and how strong the bottom half of the Premier League is. And now he has that knowledge, which means hopefully this season is better because he can go play Wolves or he can go play West Ham, and he takes it seriously.
There's not as many surprises, I suppose.
There's fewer surprises there. The risk with that, and one thing I was fearful of before 25-26 started, was did they accumulate too many negative results and there was going to be a scar tissue there that when they did hit some skids this season, they just properly go into a tailspin. The good news, or the encouraging signs right now, is while they're still having the wobbles that they had last season, they're not entirely falling to pieces anymore. So, look, Manchester United lost a lot of games last season. Ruben Amorim has spoken about in press conferences about the difficulty there. He's also spoken about how it's probably been the most tough time he's had in the world of football, not just as a player but also as a coach. He made mention of the fact that to spend a good section of last season being Europa League or bust, only to not win the Europa League, was really, really hard to take as well. There are many, many people in the comment section who emailed in going, I still haven't forgiven Bilbao. I still need more work before I can be fully convinced. But I think the important thing now is the Ineos hierarchy's made it very, very clear that now, and that season and a bit was just a learning opportunity, a work experience, shall we say.
It's mad to describe being the Manchester United head coach as that, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I think the last two Manchester United head coaches have been given wiggle room or the ability to learn on the job in a way that I think Mourinho would probably get quite annoyed at going. Erik Ten Hag, Manchester United fans after the FA Cup final were writing open letters and saying keep Erik Ten Hag off the FA Cup. And I'm sure Mourinho's going, hang on, didn't you lose 7-0 to Liverpool? Why are you being forgiven for this? And then for Ruben Amorim to lose better part of 21 matches last season. But also there's this idea of you can lose 21 matches because eventually this is going to take 2 or 3 years, where I think 2 or 3 other previous United managers will, hang on, I want 2 or 3 years. Why am I not giving this slack? So there's a commitment from Ineos with Amorim. It can be difficult for outsiders to understand, I think. There are times where, as a United fan, I'm listening to Liverpool fans having a go or Chelsea fans trying to have a go, going, why are you committed to this guy? I'm like, hey, Eunice of the side, he's the one, and they're willing to let him improve and reach the point that they think he can. So here we are.
There's definitely something in the fact that it's felt like over time it's become a bigger job, the Manchester United head coach, the Manchester United manager, just because the more it's gone wrong, the further it's been to get United back to where, they need to be and they want to be and expect to be. And there's so many different aspects to this job as well. I was listening back to Ruben Amorim's first press conference earlier on today, and he's talking about how big the club is, how many different departments there are, how many different aspects to the job there are compared to being at Sporting. And sorting out the dressing room and the culture around the club has been perhaps the biggest thing that he's had to deal with that's not been a direct football on-field matter.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, other people as well that have come into the club, even from big clubs, like Manchester City, have realised or commented on the scale of Manchester United and all those different departments. But yeah, in terms of what Ruben Amorim, in his role as head coach, inherited, obviously that is a shift from Erik Ten Hag, who was the manager, although I think there was a period after Ineos came in where I think they would have liked him to be a head coach rather than a manager, in those kind of contract talks that took place in Ibiza, where he ended up getting a +1 triggered, and as Andy says, the coaches then had to make way. Mitchell van der Gaag was a big casualty of that in terms of getting that communication, what they felt like, correct with the players and freshening that up. But I think by the end of Ten Hag's reign, the complicated nature of the dressing room, shall we say, as Andy often refers to, was kind of coming to the fore. So I've written about the episode after the Porto game, which was a big one, I think, for, in Ten Hag's reign, where they went 2-0 up, started brilliantly, attacking football. And then I think from his point of view, switched off defensively. And obviously, for example, he hooked Marcus Rashford, didn't he, at half time. But altogether, he wasn't happy with the discipline of his team. In the end, Harry Maguire had to score a last minute equaliser. He's kept doing it since then, hasn't he? But Ten Hag was furious in the dressing room afterwards, I'm told, and kind of went in hard on the players. It was quite long. I know he came across as quite a disciplinarian, but I don't think he was like that all the time with the players. I think he tried to at least choose his moments to kind of, get into them a bit. But then after that point, Bruno Fernandes, I'm told, sort of asked him and his coaching staff to leave the room so the players could kind of get together. And that's not necessarily anything unusual, really. It happened at United before, away at Newcastle after they'd lost 2-0, after they'd on a bit of a slide. It was actually just after the 7-0 as well at Anfield, and they'd won the Carabao Cup at that point. Then they had got together trying to sort it out themselves, because sometimes players can be more free with their expressions, even going after each other. It's not necessarily, right, we're going to talk about the manager now. It's actually, right, just in our own way. Strong dressing rooms, I think, are something to be cherished and encouraged, really. So that happened after Newcastle. They went on a winning run and they ended up finishing third and qualifying for the Champions League. Porto was a different story, and you had Diogo Dalot, which is kind of, when I heard this, I was sort of surprised that he actually does carry that kind of weight in the dressing room, at least from his perspective. And then, he's obviously been at the club for a long time, sort of stood up and was basically saying, even if you're not with this manager, we have to do it for ourselves. And I think his point of view, I think he felt amongst other players maybe that Ten Hag had been too strong, had not done it in the right way after the match. But listen, this is kind of like, I wasn't there, but at the same time, you get different interpretations of what's hard and what's not. So in the end, I think that showed, though, that was perhaps, there was friction really between manager and players. And I think that was then a signal that this was probably going to come to an end sooner rather than later. And obviously it did come to an end soon. So that's what Amorim's inherited. And I think that he then is also, surprisingly maybe to some people, because he's so, compelling and kind of pretty chilled as a guy sometimes with press conferences, obviously very emotional as well, and very, very invested in the club and his role as the coach. But he comes across as, you can ask him anything in press conferences, sort of seems pretty nice, He's very hard with the players, and he equally will sort of give strong missives to them if he feels like their standards aren't up there. And again, as I've written about, Manuel Ugarte was one player that got sort of quite strong criticism after the end of the season, when it was the same meeting that he told Garnacho he better have a good agent in the summer because he was staying. He felt that he wasn't at the same work levels as he had shown him at Sporting, which I think shed to people that this guy, okay, he's strong, but at least he's fair, even with previous relationships that he's had, with players. So, yeah, a complicated dressing room. Amorim is certainly somebody that has a kind of similar streak of disciplinarianism to Erik Ten Hag, but is obviously trying to do it a little bit of a different way.
Ruud van Nistelrooy was considered, and he was respected and admired, seen as a great person around the club by the players as well. But they didn't think he had the body of games as a top coach, and I think that is a fair call. I don't even mind that Amorim asked the question, why now? I think he was really committed to Sporting, who were doing really well. In the 2 games that he did stay, it was against Manchester City, they won. Braga, one of the English journalists went over to Braga. They won that one as well, and they won the league. They had a little wobble after he'd gone, but it's very difficult moving mid-season. Erik Ten Hag was sat in meetings in an airport hotel room for 5 months, planning recruitment, tactics. If you're doing this mid-season, a 5-hour meeting might sound like a lot, but you need weeks and months to plan. So he did accept. I think he spoke to the people around him, to his family. I know that there's a big demand to move from Lisbon to Manchester in November, so he obviously took part with that and
sacrificed a lot of daylight.
He sacrificed a lot of daylight to live in the darkness.
Sunshine.
Yeah. I just don't mind that he was hesitant. I don't think that was a rejection. I think that was more a respect. And I think United wanted to deal properly with Sporting as well. I think the negotiations were quite clean. You didn't hear much of that deal. I know The Athletic had a piece when he was in Lisbon, when Omar Barada had gone there. But it was done, It was done pretty discreetly. And no one knew they were in Seville. Why was he in Seville? Because Sporting had played in the Algarve. It's not that far a drive away. There was a private home booked, and I think the negotiations were done quite well once they'd identified who they wanted.
It speaks to Amorim's decision-making that he said, why now? You talk to many coaches and they say trying to implement a brand new tactical system or new game model mid-season is incredibly hard because you just don't have, particularly if you're a football team playing in Europe, you don't have the time
storm is coming, right?
To really, really drill the players and what's going on. I think Liam Thum, who sometimes does the Athletic FC podcast, has spoken to coaches and they talk about how much harder it is to coach a pressing scheme mid-season, and it's loads of different reasons, but one is it's a lot easier to get players to learn how to press when you're doing warm weather training and it's not in the cold, and there's tiny little things like that.
And he does do quite a lot of that, Amorim, even now, sort of shape and get manhandling his players into position.
Yep. And those early press conferences, Amorim said if particularly when it was the day after the Europa League game, he said those sessions were really, really hard because players who had been running 90 minutes couldn't necessarily do the training drill, so you just get them to walk. He spoke about he said these generation of players, if you play video for more than 7 minutes, forget it. which I thought was quite funny. So he keeps his video sessions really, really short, or shorter than what Erik Ten Hag was said to have done too.
Very focused, aren't they?
So his use of video analysis was one of the reasons they really liked him, and also the way he connected emotionally, especially with younger players.
Yes.
Because in the dressing room, you've got a real disparate group of people from all around the world now. And his linguistic skills were good, and he was perceived to be a good communicator. Why now? I should have just said, because we're crap, mate. Just put your name on this piece of paper. We'll put you on the EasyJet tomorrow.
It's interesting that
got your
about
extra baggage.
about the young players, though, because you read your article and you look at the way that he has dealt with some of the issues with younger end of players, Carl. And again, we're going back to how he's dealt with the way the dressing room was. You look at what's happened with Marcus Rashford during these 12 months. You look at what's happened with Alejandro Garnacho during these 12 months. Even different players in different moments. And it's been fascinating to watch how Amorim has dealt with all of this. And there's a story from the Brighton game at home last season where he gets so annoyed after the game, so impassioned, so emotional that he's breaking televisions. So understanding how he's come to terms with the job and looking at the ways in which he's done something, reflected on it, maybe changed a little bit, has actually been a very intriguing part of how this has all gone. And then getting to the summer, having the time to breathe, really, sitting down with Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada, going through exactly what should be expected of these players, almost coming up with like a guidebook for how he wanted everyone to behave in football, away from football, everything in between. Then coming into a new environment of the new look training ground, using that to try and bring a freshness. And we're beginning to see, I emphasise beginning to see how he wants his team to play on the pitch as well. There's definitely clearer signs now than there's ever been of what he wants.
Clearer signs, more encouraging signs. This is a Manchester United manager / head coach is a job that can reshape you as a coach. Louis van Gaal wrote about in one of his books how he was really, really focused on training sessions until he arrived in England and became the Manchester United manager, and he delegated more in training because he wanted to be more of a classic English manager, and he felt being a Manchester United manager you had to be a little bit more of a figurehead, which, I mean, if you're the person that interviewed Louis van Gaal, hang on, wait, why am I not getting the thing that you're known for being good at? But you get these 2 or 3 changes, and very, very early on, it's probably too big for one man. You need to split up into multiple parts, which I think maybe this Ineos structure is attempting to do. And I think that's maybe why Amorim is a head coach rather than a manager. One thing that I found really, really interesting reading Laurie's piece was in that international break between when he's being announced and between the Ipswich game, you're hearing loads of conversation about how good he is talking to young players, how all these young players are willing to run through brick walls for him. And even his opening press conference, he talks about, he was compared to Mourinho, Chelsea Mourinho in the press conference. Everyone was trying to find that, like, what's your version of the special one? Quote.
Didn't buy it.
He didn't buy it. And Amorim mentioned being a Portuguese coach always invitation to Mourinho. And he said Mourinho walked into a very, very different situation at Chelsea in the first time Mourinho did to what he was walking into. And he specifically brought up Frank Lampard. He said, Chelsea walked in and there were young players like Frank Lampard, and that's very different to what I'm walking into, which was, to me, really interesting, because when Mourinho was the United manager, he brought up the fact that Lampard at 23 was a very, very different sort of 23-year-old in terms of maturity to the United players at the time. And I was going, okay, so it felt to me as if Amorim himself was going, I'm going to be able to talk to this new generation of 23-year-olds in a way that other United coaches have had difficulties with the past. But then you read Laurie's piece, and it seems like he's perhaps not doing the thing that I expected.
I think the Lampard example is interesting. Was Amorim not saying he had a player in Lampard that would switched on to the point that he's now a manager? Or he's a pretty young manager. He's already experienced a lot.
Yeah.
So you've got that kind of person that you feel, okay, I can connect with this younger player. I think Amorim's strategy anyway, even regardless of what he thinks of the players, is to do feedback in group settings. So we talked about the Ugarte example. There's other instances of that where rather than have a face-to-face with a player, he would have a group meeting and gives the feedback there. Obviously, on the training pitches, as I say, he's kind of getting up close and personal and kind of having those dialogues there. But in terms of the kind of bigger conversations, it's usually a group setting, and I think he does that because he wants a sort of layer of detachment so that you've got that Jose element. So some young players will say, I would run through a wall for Jose, because there's that sort of almost, he is my manager and he's in that position above me. He's not a kind of fatherly figure where I'm doing it out of necessarily love. It's kind of more out of obligation, and you've driven me to this because of maybe. I mean, Fergie obviously had that as part of his toolkit, didn't he? Fear. It wasn't just fear; it was also charm, and he did have those kind of arm around the shoulder moments with players. But
it's about having the tools. It's about having access to all the different things, isn't it? That you can use for the individual player. That's good man management.
Yeah, and so I'd be interested if that does develop. He doesn't go on socials, obviously, with the players, which I don't think you would expect that, a manager. He's a younger manager as well, so I think because he's 40, maybe he also thinks I really have to double down on this kind of approach.
Trips.
No, he's not getting the goggles on and ducking and diving.
I'm not your mate, I'm your boss.
Exactly.
Seems to be the approach.
And also, I suppose, because he's got such a young coaching staff as well. I mean, I know Emmanuel Ferro's a bit older and the fitness coach as well, but, Adelio Candido is 29, I think. Carlos Fernandez is 30. So they're also younger. So I think he just emphasises the fact that I do need to have this sort of separation from the players, shall we say. I think he's pretty, I know he's pretty close to Bruno in terms of those one-on-ones. I think Bruno goes to him as much as, vice versa. And he's kind of seen as the lieutenant. I mean, Ten Hag entrusted him with that responsibility when he was still in charge, and that's kind of continued. And we can all see that Bruno's a very smart guy and can understand ideas.
Listening to him in interviews, you can tell he's embracing that, to be fair, as well. I think I've said before, he's almost become a bit of a statesman for Manchester United and a spokesperson, certainly in the early parts of this season. Hello everyone, just got home after a few days on the road, and unfortunately I need to let you know about a technical problem that we had with our recording in the studio today. So unfortunately we don't have video for the final few minutes of today's episode, so my apologies for that. It will be an audio only graphic on YouTube, so hopefully you can still enjoy the conversation, and thanks again for watching as always. Let's get back to it. How do you think the coaching staff, probably a question for both of you considering it was covered in both of your pieces, how do you think the coaching staff have helped Amorim to install his way and his way of playing?
There is chosen ones. This happens in football, and it can be quite uncomfortable because established people get pushed out or their views are no longer considered. And when Fergie stepped aside, it wasn't just about Fergie, it was his 3 or 4 coaches around him. Was that a mistake? Probably was. But it's how it is in football and in life. These are the people who he trusts. He's got an extremely difficult job. He has to delegate internally within those, but he also has to delegate. He will speak to Jason Wilcox several times a day, and I think they're broadly in agreement on most things. But it's fine if they disagree. We disagree. It's not a problem. The key is that there's a trust and there's a respect, and they're both pushing to make Manchester United much better again. They've both got exactly the same aim. And this, I've seen previous Manchester United managers briefing against the club. You're not getting that. You've got a real tight centre of power.
Are they not wedded to one another as well, in a way?
I wouldn't say wedded. I think that's too strong, because if he loses the next 9 games, I don't see how it's possible to keep your job.
No.
He is the coach, and he's got this huge salary to deliver results. I think there's a lot of slack cut in his first half season, or just over half season. Get the mistakes out of the way now. Of course, there's still going to be more mistakes. United are going to lose matches, but learn your new league, your new country, learn about your players. It's going to be bad. Fans didn't really know how bad it was going to be. I didn't.
I don't think anybody did.
I don't think anybody did.
Well, when you think about it, United they were down in the table, but they were still in touching distance to the Champions League places, 4 points or whatever. And I think
no one would have expected 15
for that.
No, nobody.
That's like the almost worst case scenario.
Yeah, but if things do get better now, they look like they are getting better, there may be a point where you look back and think that was actually pretty smart.
Well, actually, fans over the years have said, let's bottom it out, let's start again. They almost got that in a way. It wasn't relegation, but it wasn't far off.
And I think fans, sorry, Carl, it's one reason fans like Amorim. They like that brutal honesty. I think they actually like Ralph Rangnick a bit, because
it's
that
similar vibes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, he's more fondly remembered for the press conference and the comment about open heart surgery than anything, actually, he did at United.
The Europa League final defeat is a really interesting one.
Are we allowed to bring this up?
No.
There you go. In that, you go from and very much the feeling towards the end of Ten Hag's season, towards that FA Cup final, was this is getting quite painful. Can we keep going with this? This feels like rock bottom. Then you have the euphoric moment, the FA Cup. You find a way to get back into European football as well. I think we did one of the final home games. We recorded at Old Trafford, and we're all sort of looking at each other going, what are we going to do if they don't finish in Europe? Sort of, well, I guess I'll go into more youth team games. I guess you're going to do this, and I guess you're going to do this, and we're all sort of scrambling. And then you get that almost get out of jail free card in winning the FA Cup. And yes, I'm still absolutely furious that we weren't victorious in Bilbao. But by not getting that get out of jail free card, that might have caused a bit of a shake-up in terms of, okay, now we have to really go for a clean slate. Okay, now we have to take the transfer window with a different approach to perhaps what they initially planned, where maybe you've had an extra 50 to 70 million of Champions League football in there. So I am not saying losing the Europa League final is a good thing. I am saying the Europa League final is that sort of chastening failure that very often gets you to sort your life out.
Well, I still think we don't know yet whether losing that Europa League final was a good thing, because almost if this season becomes something that it could still become, there's still time for it to become something very good, and United get back into the Champions League, get back up to the top end of the table, you could maybe make the argument that despite losing the game and missing out on Europe this season and the finances being hit, it's actually allowed them to build a bit more for what's next. And him having that extra time every single week can only be a good thing. I just wonder what happens next now. Beginning to think about the next 12 months, beginning to think about all the things that have happened since he arrived last November, all the different incidents that we've talked about, how that's making him hopefully a better Manchester United head coach. What does that look like in a year's time?
Well, hopefully he's still at the club, because I think that would mean that United have been successful to a degree that, you know, he can stay in charge, because obviously that's been a question that has kind of permeated. It's only been a year, but how often has it come up?
That, yeah.
He himself.
How many times? Yeah.
Well, he's brought it up. Fans have brought it up. We've talked about it.
But the most telling thing is Sir Jim Ratcliffe speaking before the Sunderland game?
Just after the Sunderland game,
before the Liverpool one, wasn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
that was the key. But so just before the Sunderland game, you know, the people are getting excited, you know, from outside of United that this could be terminal here. This could be it if they lose to Sunderland. But actually, the feeling inside the club was that even wouldn't have been, you know, for him, because they have this faith in him from doing the work behind. And we don't know, do we? It is still a hope. He's won 2 titles in Portugal, is evidence to what he can do. But obviously, that's a different. There's no evidence from what he's done at United that this will work. So there is a bit of faith there, but I think to not wedded, but their obviously reputations are aligned, aren't they? Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, Sir Jim Ratcliffe with, okay, he's the kind of the top boss. I suppose he's not going to fire himself, is he? But you've got, you know, people there that are invested certainly in Ruben Amorim being a success. So I think for all the noise outside, they were still having that belief and confidence and alignment with him even throughout that period. And obviously now it's had an uptick where you've got 3 wins, a couple of draws. Okay, could have actually even made more points from that situation. Yeah. And I do think that, to your point, do we know if it's good or not this season? We'll have to find out, because if they end up finishing 5th, I think we can all say, fair enough, they managed to clean slate, change the system, change the players within the system and get it going. If they don't, if they finish outside the Europa League places, for example, then it's been another disaster, really, because that has to be a minimum. And I know that's maybe applying a bit of pressure, but come on, the Premier League is pretty condensed at the moment. There's teams showing fallibilities that we didn't expect to. I think it is an opportunity. For all that AFCON will affect the thing, for all that, you know, you can't necessarily say that this is absolutely the visualisation of what Amorim wants to do on the pitch. I do think there's a real opportunity for United to make this a season where they go, okay, that was actually in the end probably the bitter pill to swallow that made us feel better this season, that we've got Champions League at the end of it.
From what you've heard, do you think he's still growing into the role as Manchester United head coach?
I think the more experience he has makes him better. He has a better handle on the club. He's only been here for 1 year. He also has another life. He's got a young family. You know, it's not just about what's happening for him professionally. And he's got a team of coaches who feel responsibility to him. So he does delegate. I think United feel with him, they are putting in a more solid structure. It's not built on sand. These are not players being brought in to qualify for the Champions League this year. They've got a younger age profile. They've got a much more sensible financial package with the wages. I still think you need 2 or 3 more transfer windows before this team, in an ideal world, is one capable of challenging for the title. But I can see positives. But Laurie's absolutely right. You can't be finishing 9th and passing it off as some sort of success. It's got to be European football. And then the next question is, well, is Conference League good enough? Probably not. And again,
you'd enjoy it.
I would enjoy it. And I wouldn't mind watching United at Old Trafford once in a while. I miss European football. I really do.
Some more fanzines, yeah.
I do miss watching United, and I've been envious of teams going and playing these European matches. So that's got to be the aim for this year. And, more goals. I think we're seeing that. We're in a better position than we were. We just need to see the hard evidence.
And more of a development of the style as well. We've talked about how there's been the tweaks, the under-the-hood changes, as you called them, Carl. The new players coming in. And I think actually understanding now that Matthijs de Ligt jumping into midfield, Luke Shaw doing the same, and Mbeumo and Cunha making those number 10 positions make more sense. The recruitment has definitely been key in helping the system and the formation work better, and the strategy that Amorim wants to play with. And seeing more of a development of that as this season goes on would be another key sign that things are working.
Yep, absolutely. Maybe I'm being a bit greedy here. I'd like to see a couple more academy players get some more minutes. Might happen either in December or towards the end of the season when the league position gets a bit firmer. But
I don't think an academy player has started in the Premier League yet this season. I think Mainoo's starting the League Cup game. I think I'm right in saying is the only academy player who started a match.
I mean, before the season started, my idea of what United's best 11 would be is very different to what as now looks to be a clearer picture now. I think I did not expect De Ligt to start the season this well, and he's steadily growing and growing in more confidence, and that's fantastic. I think things will again change during AFCON, and I think Andy's completely bang on when he keeps saying setbacks will happen, defeats will happen, and this is also why there've been 2 or 3 press conferences where journalists have gone to Amorim, are the good times here yet? And Amorim himself's like, because we've got a pretty brutal December-January period coming up, and you're going to be without Ahmad, you're going to be without Mbeumo, you're going to be without those sort of characteristics, is a term Amorim likes to use quite a bit, because he's trying to get more correct characteristics in the team, or characteristics to get his style of play across. And he's going to lose 2 very, very good attacking players, 2 left footers as well, which are really, really important. But like Andy says again, 2 or 3 more windows, but you've got to make sure these are the windows. You want more transfer windows that are like summer 2025, not summer 2023, for example, or even, the summer where it was Cavani, Telles and Van der Beek. You don't want transfer windows like that. And this is why we're always in this state of United are 2 or 3 transfer windows away from being 2 or 3 transfer windows away, or you're 2 or 3 signings away from getting there. And they've made attempts. There've definitely been seasons where they've maybe got into Champions League football and then gone, great, title race time, and it's just fallen flat on the face. But this looks different, and hopefully, I don't want to say it's good yet, but the signs are encouraging at least.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's certainly been an interesting 12 months. Let's hope the next 12 months has even more good things in store. But for the minute, Carl, Laurie, Andy, been nice to spend the last few days with you. Nice way to finish it off. And thank you for watching and listening as well. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already. Like the video and also get involved in the comments too. And click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TOT Devils on Instagram, X and TikTok. Thanks for watching.